Longtime Norwegian cruise line customer travels on Virgin Voyages for the first time on today's episode of Cruising with Eric. Hello cruisers, it's your friend Eric coming to you once again from my bedroom/office here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And today I'm going to talk to you about my very first trip on Virgin Voyages. I guess you could say I was a virgin. Last week I got off the brand new Norwegian Viva. I did a 7-day on the Norwegian Viva and got off the Viva that morning, walked down the pier and got on the Scarlet Lady. I did a side to side, 7 days on the Viva, then 4 days on the Scarlet Lady. I decided to take that cruise because earlier this year I learned that Virgin was doing a special where if you cruise with them for the first time this year, they would match your status from another cruise line. You probably already noticed that this is a fairly long video, and I apologize for that ahead of time. I usually try to keep my videos under 7 minutes. There's a reason why the World Championships of Public Speaking are 5 to 7 minute long speeches, because people don't want to listen longer than that. But I am going to break this up into sections. I'm going to talk about different aspects of Virgin Voyages, and I will put the little chapter markers down at the bottom of the screen. So if you want to, you can skip ahead to the things that interest you. But of course, it helps the algorithm and the channel if you watch the whole thing. First thing I just want to point out with Virgin Voyages is that there are, of course, no kids. I'm going on the Norwegian breakaway later this week, on a week from tomorrow, in fact, and it's going to be New Year's Eve, and they've already sent out warnings there's going to be a lot of kids. If you don't want to be on a cruise with a lot of kids, then pay attention to what time of year you cruise, or go on Virgin Voyages, and you won't see any. Okay, let's talk about getting on the ship. Let's talk about embarkation. The way that Virgin Voyages has it set up is when you do your online check-in, they give you an assigned time to show up. Now, unlike most cruise lines, including Norwegian, where you can get in the building as early as 9:30 in the morning and wait in line and then, do your check-in, and then you can wait in the terminal for a little while until you can get on the ship, usually around 11:30. Virgin Voyages, you can't even go to the building earlier than 2 o'clock. 2 o'clock is the earliest report time or show up at the building time, and they won't even let you in prior to your time. And for me, that was a little bit of a problem because I got off the Norwegian Viva and they kind of shoved us out at 9:30. So from 9:30 until 2 o'clock, I really didn't have anywhere to be. I did find a little restaurant there on Dodge Island called the Seaman Cafe. Very highly recommended if you're ever trying to kill some time on Dodge Island. Just a little mom and pop restaurant. So I did hang out there for a little while. So that ended up being okay. But I've also wondered, if people fly in the night before a cruise, which you should always do, and stay in a hotel, well, most hotels are going to have a checkout time of 11 a.m. So if you have to be out of your hotel at 11 a.m., but you can't go to the cruise line until 2 p.m., what are you supposed to do with yourselves? So that's kind of an odd thing and just something to think about before you book a Virgin cruise. I will say, however, at 2 p.m., I actually got there about 5 minutes after 2. I went immediately in the building, went up the escalators, walked immediately up to a check-in place. They checked my passport and other things, and they gave me a little stupid bracelet thing, which I didn't like. I prefer the card. I know I'm in the minority when I say that, but I prefer the card. And then I walked immediately on the ship. Now let me say that again. I went from front door of the building to on the ship in less than 15 minutes. So that's a good thing. And when I got on the ship, I was able to go directly to my stateroom, which you usually can't do on NCL or other cruise lines. NCL, I'm usually on the ship by 11. I might not be able to get in my room until 1 o'clock, 1:30. In some ways, that's not a big deal. You go to the buffet, you go to the bar, you kind of mill around, you go make sure you've got all your dining reservations and everything taken care of. But the only thing is you are dragging your carry-on bags with you. Whereas on Virgin, you go directly to your room, drop your bags, and then you can go explore the ship. One thing I will say about that, however, is I got on the ship at 2, but my check bag didn't show up until a little after 4. And that in itself isn't a big deal, but I did have the solo cruisers meetup that I wanted to go to, and that was at 5:15. So once I got my bag, I had to quickly shower and get changed and head to the solo meetup. As soon as I got on the ship and I got to my room, I was almost immediately greeted by my housekeeper, my room steward, whatever you want to call that guy, and that's very good. Seems like on NCL, since they reduced their housekeeping staff earlier this year, you don't see your housekeeping staff as often as you used to on NCL. The housekeeping staff on NCL seems like they're spread very thin. They're covering a lot of cabins, and they're not near yours nearly as often as they used to be. So I think the number of cabins to steward ratio on Virgin seems to be better than it is on NCL. Hopefully, as NCL works out their kinks of their only one service a day with fewer people thing, they'll kind of get those numbers adjusted a little bit to where we can actually see our cabin stewards a little often. Or a little more often, I should say. Let's talk about the way money works on board a Virgin ship. Typically on a cruise ship like NCL, you have your onboard account. If you buy a picture or you pay for something else, then that adds to your account. Sometimes you have onboard credit that you've gotten for a special through the cruise line or through your travel agent or something, and you use up your onboard credit, and then it goes on the credit card you have on file. And that includes if you buy drinks that are above and beyond whatever drink package you have on NCL. So on Virgin Voyages, you have 2 different kinds of money. You have Sailor Loot and you have Bar Tab. You look on your wallet thing in the app and you see the 2 different balances. Your Sailor Loot is your regular onboard spend, and that's just like you would expect onboard spend anywhere else, or any other cruise line, I should say. For example, I got about a $36 credit on my Sailor Loot because we got a refund for port taxes because we had an itinerary change due to weather. And then I went to the gift shop and bought a little Virgin Voyages magnet, which was $10. That $10 came off of that credit. And then you have your Bar Tab. And the way that the Bar Tab works is you get a certain amount of Bar Tab with your cruise package, and then you might get a little bit extra for whatever reason. I had what they called the Deep Blue Extras because I did the matching thing from match your status from another cruise line. So I actually had $400 in Bar Tab. Now, typically on a cruise line, you get the drink package, and then you can get all the drinks you want up to $15 each. And if a drink is more than $15, then you just pay the difference out of your regular account. Whereas on Virgin Voyages, you just have Bar Tab, and you just go and buy drinks, and it just depletes from your Bar Tab. I think that leads to people over drinking on Virgin Voyages. I saw a lot of drunk people. Heck, I got hammered twice. There was one night, after the red party they call it, or the Scarlet night, I was pretty hammered. I had a drink that had absinthe in it, with some other things, and I went to the pizza place on the ship and announced to the room, "I'm drunk and I need pizza." And even on the last night, I still had a lot of money left, and I was buying like $65 scotch just because I had so much money left. So that is a difference in the way that the drink packages work. On Norwegian, you typically get the $15 drink package with your cruise package. You, of course, have to pay gratuities on that, which is about $20 a day. Whereas on Virgin Voyages, you have Bar Tab, and you use up your Bar Tab to buy drinks. And I guess if you don't have enough, you can always add money to your Bar Tab. Let's talk about the atmosphere on Virgin Voyages. You know, you go on your typical cruise line, and there's trivia going on, and there's different things going on, and even in the evening there's the show, and then there's the nightclub, and there's all sorts of different things going on. Whereas on Virgin Voyages, there's kind of one big theme going on at all times. And frankly, to me, it kind of seemed like a frat party for middle-aged people. And if that's your scene, then good for you. If you want to go to loud boom, boom, boom music and drink a lot like you did when you were in your 20s in college, then go for it. But that's kind of what I felt like Virgin Voyages was. The Scarlet night was just a big loud party. The pajama party that they had the first night, even though it was Christmas themed, was just a big loud party. It's a party ship. So please bear that in mind if you haven't been on Virgin before. It's a big party ship. All right, let's talk about food. You know, Virgin Voyages, they're known for their food. They brag about their food. They talk about their food. And that's great if you've made reservations ahead of time. Being my first time on Virgin, I didn't really know all the procedures. I kind of wanted to get the newbie experience for being on Virgin, even though, like I know, on Norwegian, you should really do your dinner reservations ahead of time. I didn't do dinner reservations ahead of time. Plus, because I was solo on Virgin, I wanted to see what they did for the solo cruisers regarding dinner. So to that end, they did have a table at one of the dining rooms on the first night for the solo cruisers to go and meet up and talk, and that was great. But that was it. The remaining nights of the cruise, I couldn't get into any of the restaurants. And I've said this on Facebook, and I've had some Virgin Voyages fanboys like come after me and say, oh, that's not true. You could just go to the restaurant and say, you know, you want to be seated and you might have to wait. No. I went to the restaurants and I was told, we're oversold, we're overbooked. No, you cannot eat dinner here under any circumstances. I was told that at the Korean restaurant, at the steakhouse, at the Italian restaurant, and somewhere else. I just couldn't get into the restaurants, so I can't talk about them. The one restaurant I was able to get into is what they call their test kitchen, and it was just weird food. Oh, let's experiment with food. I will say that they had a very smoky salmon thing, and I've got some slow motion footage of that I'll show right now. And I'm not a salmon eater, but that was actually good because it had so much smoke to it, it really didn't taste like salmon anymore. And then later in that same meal, we had asparagus sorbet. Asparagus sorbet. Who thought that was a good idea? So that was just weird. I think I ended up getting a pizza that night also because I was still hungry. They did have lamb at the test kitchen. That was good. And they even brought me a second portion of that because I commented that it was good, and I think they kind of gathered that I wasn't enjoying the other courses quite so much. You know, Virgin, they talk about, oh, we're too young, cool, and hip to have a buffet. You know, no buffet on this ship. Well, they have a large thing called, I don't know what they call it, the food court, and different stations. Here's the breakfast station, here's the burger station, here's the taco station. And if it looks like a buffet and quacks like a buffet, it's probably a buffet. Now, granted, when you go to a buffet, typically you walk up and you just take food out of the containers. Whereas on this ship, you go to like the breakfast place and say, I want so many eggs and sausages and ding ding, and they give you a vibrating thing and you have to come back and get it after it's done cooking. The burgers were pre-cooked to a point. I don't think they'd been sitting there long, but they were rapidly cooking burgers at lunchtime. And yeah, they like to say we don't have a buffet, but that place, that area of the ship, it certainly felt like a buffet. Let's talk about phone apps. The Norwegian phone app is notorious for its communication feature not working all the time. And it's also kind of notorious for it doesn't always have all the activities listed. There's often things missing on the app, and that has to do with this very weird, archaic way that Norwegian edits their Freestyle Daily newsletter. Speaking of newsletter, there is no newsletter on Virgin Voyages unless you go down to Sailor Services and specifically ask for it, get a copy. They don't just bring a copy to your room like they do on NCL. Whereas the Virgin app, it has all the activities, and you can say, oh, I want to go to this activity at this time, and then it will send you a reminder later, hey, don't forget to go to this activity. That's very cool. It has a way where you can theoretically make dinner reservations if everything's not already full. You can also reserve times for shows. That's how I went in to reserve my disembarkation time. Well, that was before the weather came and all hell broke loose. But I found that the Virgin app was very good. It's a much superior product than the onboard app on NCL. Solo program. You know, this was my 10th cruise since COVID. So this is my 10th cruise since March of 2022. And most of those cruises I was on NCL as a solo. You know, NCL they kind of created the solo market a few years ago, or about 10 years ago, I should say. When they built the Norwegian Epic, that was the first ship to have the solo cabins. They call them studios. And because one of the big problems for solo travelers in the cruise industry is when you cruise solo, typically you have to pay double because the cruise line wants that much revenue for that cabin. So whether it's one person or two, you got to pay double. With the studios on NCL, you don't have to do that. The studios have their own pricing. And I will say that Virgin Voyages, very good. They do have solo cabins. They have solo insider cabins, which is what I was in, and they have solo ocean view cabins. Now, I did make a video where I toured the solo ocean view cabin on Virgin Voyages. You can see that here on the channel. And I have a video where I toured the studio cabin on the Norwegian Prima, relatively new ship, and that's also here on the channel. So if you're interested in seeing those, be sure to check that out. Norwegian very wisely has a solo meetup every night on their cruises, about 99% of the time. And it can be hit or miss because it's usually a kid from the cruise director's staff and it rotates every week, and some of them are much better at running the solo meetups than others. Some of them are better at making dinner arrangements for the solos than others. But on Virgin Voyages, there was a solo meetup. I think it was at about 5:15 on the first day of the cruise. And it was a couple of the kids from the cruise director's staff, or the happening staff, as they call themselves. And we just kind of went around, hey, what's your name? Where are you from? Okay. And that was kind of it. There wasn't any other interaction, really. They did, like I said, have that table for us for dinner that first night. But after that, we were pretty much on our own. They did have a solo meeting on the first sea day at like 10 a.m. that a few people went to. But it really wasn't, again, like an organized meeting where they do any kind of activity amongst the solos to kind of, you know, create a more group atmosphere. And on the last day of the cruise, there was a solo meetup on the agenda, and I went there, right place, right time. I double-checked several times, and there was nobody there. So maybe it got moved and I didn't find out, but you'd think the app would have updated and said where it was if it did get moved. So it almost seems like the solo program is an afterthought on Virgin Voyages, and that's really unfortunate. That's something that they could fix. They could say, not only could they have better solo meetings, they should do dinner reservations for the solo group. They could even ask you ahead of time via email, weeks ahead of time, do you want to participate in these dinners? And they could plan accordingly. I will say that Virgin Voyages left a letter in my room that said, oh, it appears that you're traveling solo. Please come to this solo meetup on the first night, and you can go to dinner at this time. I've never gotten any kind of welcome solo traveler letter on NCL. You just have to know that the solo meetups are happening and go to them. So let's talk about loyalty programs. Norwegian is a big company. They've been around for a long time, and they have what they call their Latitudes Rewards program. You get points for going on cruises. I love the fact that there's no way for people to buy into it. It's not like, oh, if you get the right credit card or a mortgage from a particular bank, then you get a bunch of points like a lot of airline programs do. No, the only way to get points on the NCL Latitudes program is to physically go on a cruise. A lot of times you might be able to get double points or triple points where you get 2 or 3 points per day. They've had a lot of that in the last couple of years. That's how I went from silver to sapphire in just over a year. But that's their program, and the higher you go up in the tiers, the more perks you get. You get free specialty dining, free laundry, dinner with officers, and once you get up to like sapphire, diamond, that level, they just kind of schmooze you a little bit. Virgin doesn't really have a rewards program yet. They are still a new company. They launched the Scarlet Lady on Valentine's Day 2020, which was exactly a month before all hell broke loose with COVID. So I cut them a little slack there that they haven't really established it yet. They have their thing called Deep Blue Extras, and that's how I got free Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi is very good, by the way, on Virgin, and that's also how I got extra money for my bar tab. And they did have a please come to the Deep Blue Extras reception, which was just a roped off area in one of the bars, and they said, here's some free drinks. And that was it. There was no presentation. Usually on NCL, the Cruise Next person who is also in charge of the loyalty program, they come out, welcome back to Virgin, welcome back to NCL, I should say. We appreciate your loyalty. You know, we've got this many silver members, this many gold members on this cruise, you know, so many platinum. Oh, we've got a handful of sapphires, a few diamonds, and there's the one ambassador. Ambassador 700 days on sea. Wow. But they at least make that presentation, and they talk about a little bit about upcoming cruises, and usually the captain and some other officers are there. There was no kind of presentation at all at the Deep Blue Extras meeting on the Scarlet Lady. My understanding is that about a year from now, they're going to really establish their loyalty program, and people are going to be grandfathered in. I will be interested to see how I am grandfathered in, because some people at Deep Blue Extras, they have it because they cruised with Virgin in the first couple of years, or they cruised with them 3 times this year, or like me, they did the Match NC program is what they called it. So I'll be interested to see if they do have like points per day, and if I have the same number of points on Virgin. That remains to be seen, and I look forward to seeing how the Virgin loyalty program works out in the future. Let's talk about disembarkation. Now, the way Virgin has it set up, it should work great. When you're on the ship, you can go into their app. Their app's very good. And you can go into what they call shore things, shore excursions, and pick Miami, and then you can pick a time to disembark the ship. And if everybody shows up at their assigned times, it should move fairly smoothly. I had signed up for a 7:30 a.m. departure from the ship. Even though I had a 3:30 flight going home from Miami, my idea was I knew there was going to be some rough weather in Charlotte and maybe even in Miami that day. So I figured if I got off the ship as quickly as possible, I could run to the airport and possibly even get on standby for maybe the 10 o'clock flight. There's a 1 o'clock flight, just trying to get home a little bit earlier. That should have been great, but the Kraken struck and the port of Miami was closed until about 11:30 that Sunday morning. I have another video on the channel where I talk about that, where we were stuck on the Scarlet Lady that morning. They finally got into Pierside. They finally got the ramp, the gangway lined up to the ship, and then they finally started letting people leave. But it was just a huge cluster, and I've got a video just showing the crowd that I can show you right now. Just lots of people trying to get off the ship at once, and Virgin seemed to be ill prepared for that. I say that Virgin Voyages was ill prepared for such a situation because they only had 2 stations where you could scan your bracelet to get off the ship. That's how they know people have left. But they only had 2 stations. And you would have thought, okay, form 2 lines, beep off, beep off, beep off, and people would just go off. But it would be about 30 people would get off, and then the line would come to a screeching halt for seemingly no reason. You know, it'd be beep off, beep off, beep off, problem. Oh, so now the line has to come to a screeching halt. They should have had a half a dozen people on each checkout line ready to grab that person, pull them aside and say, here's the problem. Here's why there's an issue. I think a lot of people had a credit balance on their account because we got some refund for port taxes that they weren't aware of, and that had to be dealt with. I don't know. But all I know is that after they finally got Pierside and finally got the gangway attached and finally started letting people off, the line just came to a screeching halt way too many times, and a lot of people became angry. There were Karens being Karen, and even I at one point got a little loud and said, why is the line not moving? But hopefully Virgin had a meeting afterwards and said, we really got to think about how we're going to handle it in the event that we have a late arrival in the future. So those are my thoughts after my first cruise on Virgin Voyages. I really think they're trying. They're still a new company. They're trying to figure out how they're going to do some things. I mean, their niche is loud, boom, 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 party boat. And if that's your scene, great. It's not really my scene. They do mostly short cruises out of Miami. They do 4-day and 3-day cruises. I guess you could do a 4 and a 3-day back-to-back if you wanted to do a full week. I don't really see myself flying to Miami to do only a 3-day cruise or a 4-day cruise. Technically, this was the shortest cruise I've ever gone on, being 4 days. I've only done 5 days or longer in the past. Bottom line, I'm still a customer of Norwegian Cruise Lines. I didn't go on Virgin and just have my hair blown back and thought, oh wow, I'm never going on NCL again. There are fans of Virgin Voyages who say they will never do anything else. Good for them. I was happy to meet some of them. But for the most part, I think myself and the other Norwegian cruisers who were on this cruise last week on the Scarlet Lady, we were not overly impressed, and we're still going to be NCL customers at least for the foreseeable future. That's it for today, folks. I know this was a long video. If you've made it all the way to the end, I really do appreciate it. Why don't you put the word banana in the comments down below so I actually know you made it all the way to the end. That might be fun to see how many people actually do that. Until we meet again, may you avoid the Kraken and have fair winds and following seas. Thanks. This has been a production of Cruising with Eric. Please like, share, and subscribe.